The sound Crag Vex made when he hit the floor was not the sound of a body falling. It was the sound of a geological event. 340 pounds of armored Cranther muscle struck the durasteel plating of the shattered comet's main floor hard enough that the impact resonated through the deck plates, hard enough that bottles rattled behind the bar, hard enough that a glass of Threxian whiskey slid 3 inches across a table before tipping over. Crag lay there, all 7 feet and 5 inches of him, staring at the ceiling with four eyes that couldn't quite focus. His breath came in short, confused gasps, the kind of breathing a being makes when their brain is trying to reconcile what just happened with what should be physically possible. The human standing over him checked his drink. Still full. He took a sip. The bar went silent. Not the nervous silence of people pretending not to watch violence unfold. Not the anticipatory silence before something terrible happens. This was the stunned silence of 47 beings who had just witnessed physics work backwards. The kind of silence that follows miracles or catastrophes when the mind needs a moment to catch up with the eyes. The human's name was Silas Brennan, and 90 seconds ago he'd made the biggest mistake of Crag Vex's violent life look like a learning opportunity. But to understand how we arrived at this moment, we need to go back. 12 minutes. To before the silence. To before the impact. To when the evening was just another night on the edge of civilized space and the shattered comet was doing what it always did, selling drinks to people who probably shouldn't have them. My name is Vorik. I've run the shattered comet for 200 cycles. That's 200 years by human reckoning, though time loses meaning when you're this far from anything resembling order or law. The bar sits on Dock Ring 7 of Frontier Station Omega 7, which is exactly as pleasant as it sounds. The kind of place where even smugglers complain about the neighborhood. In 2 centuries of serving drinks to the galaxy's unwanted, I've learned 3 fundamental truths. First, everyone lies. The trader at table 6 who says he's hauling agricultural equipment is carrying weapons. The Keleth miners at the bar claiming they struck a legitimate claim are working a stolen excavation site. The diplomat in the corner booth insisting he's here for cultural exchange is absolutely buying illegal tech. Everyone lies. It's not personal. It's survival. Second, everyone is armed. The concealed plasma cutter under that jacket. The monofilament wire in those gloves. The poison injector disguised as a medical implant. I've seen it all. After 200 cycles, you develop a sense for violence the way some beings develop a sense for weather. You can feel it gathering like a storm front. Third, the stories people tell about themselves are usually more dangerous than the truth. A being's reputation can start a war faster than an insult. A rumor can collapse a trade route. A legend can make a coward brave or a warrior cautious. Stories have weight out here, sometimes more weight than facts. I thought I'd seen everything. Crime syndicates collapsing over spilled drinks, bar fights escalating into orbital bombardments, assassination attempts, coup attempts, suicide pacts, marriage proposals that ended in bloodshed, 200 cycles of humanity's worst behavior and the galaxy's most creative violence. Then the human walked in, and I learned there's a 4th rule. The evening started ordinary enough. 47 patrons scattered across the establishment. I count them habitually now, the way some beings count their breathing. 47 bodies, 12 different species, 17 weapons I could see, and probably 30 I couldn't. Standard Tuesday. Table 3 held a cluster of Threxian smugglers arguing about cargo routes through the Terminus Belt. Their voices carried that particular edge of beings who'd been drinking for profit margins and losing. Table 7, 2 Keleth miners, quiet, methodical, working through their radiation bonuses 1 glass at a time. The kind of drinkers who approached alcohol like a job. And in the back corner, occupying their usual booth like it was a throne room, sat Crag Vex and his crew. 5 Cranther, all muscle, all attitude, all very clear about who owned what on this station and what happened to beings who forgot. I was polishing glasses with my lower hands while mixing drinks with my upper ones. Multitasking is easier when you have 6 limbs. The music played low on thing with a lot of bass that the humans seemed to like. The air recyclers hummed their eternal song of filtering out smoke, sweat, and whatever else 47 different metabolisms were exhaling. A normal night, then the front door hissed open. At first, nobody noticed. The shattered comet gets traffic. Dock Ring 7 might be the worst real estate on Omega 7, but it's still a station of 12,000 souls with nowhere better to go. The door opens, someone walks in, someone walks out. The cycle continues, but then something changed. The station lights shifted slightly as the airlock cycled. Just a flicker, a momentary dimming as power redistributed, nothing unusual, But in that half second of altered illumination, someone near the entrance saw who'd entered. They said a word, one word, quiet, almost reverent, human. It moved through the bar like a wave, not spoken, not shouted. Just that single word rippling from table to table, being to being. The conversations didn't stop, but they lowered. Volume dropped just enough that everyone could listen without appearing to listen. That particular kind of attention that predators pay to unfamiliar things entering their territory. I glanced up from the glass I was polishing. The human stood in the doorway for a moment, letting his eyes adjust to the dim interior. The shattered comet doesn't believe in bright lighting. Bright lights show too much. Out here, people prefer shadows. He wasn't impressive by galactic standards. Most species in the belt are bigger, heavier, equipped with natural weapons that humans fundamentally lack. No claws extending from those hands, no armored hide covering that frame, no mandibles, no venom glands, no dermal plating, just a tall biped, maybe 6 feet 1 inch, lean build, dark hair cut short, a worn jacket that had seen better years in several star systems, and those eyes. Gray, calm, the kind of calm that comes from seeing terrible things and deciding they're not worth getting excited about. He moved through the room with the relaxed posture of someone who clearly wasn't worried about being surrounded by criminals, smugglers, and worse. Not the false bravado of someone pretending not to be afraid. Not the tense readiness of someone expecting violence. Just comfortable. Like walking into a bar full of armed felons was something he did every Tuesday. Humans had only joined galactic society 50 of their years ago. A blink, an instant. Most of us knew them the same way we knew black holes through stories, through rumors, through second-hand accounts and third-hand legends. They came from a death world. Earth, a class 12, a planet where almost everything tried to kill them. Predators, venomous creatures, microscopic organisms, weather patterns that could end civilizations, geological instability, solar radiation. The list went on. Humans survived by being adaptable, resourceful, unpredictable, but the stories also said they preferred diplomacy, cooperation, which was probably why seeing one walk into my bar felt like watching a librarian wander into a war zone. He approached the counter. Up close, he looked even more ordinary. No obvious augmentation, no visible weapons, no combat implants I could detect. Just a man who looked like he spent a lot of time observing rather than talking. He pulled out a stool and sat down. Then he looked at me with those gray eyes and said in a voice the translator rendered as smooth and casual, "What do you serve that won't kill me?" I blinked all 4 eyes. "That depends," I said carefully, "on what parts of your biology are likely to dissolve if I give you the wrong drink." The human actually smiled. Flat teeth, predator teeth despite the evolutionary implications. "Ethanol works," he said simply. "Flexible metabolism, more or less." I grabbed a bottle of Turellian amber from the shelf. The good stuff. Or at least the stuff that probably wouldn't cause organ failure in carbon-based life forms. Poured a small amount into a reinforced glass. "This probably won't kill you," I said. He sniffed it once. Professional, checking for toxins, or just appreciating the aroma I couldn't tell. Then he drank it in one smooth motion, placed the glass back on the counter with a soft click. "Another," I poured. "You lost?" I asked. The question every bartender asks the obviously out-of-place customer. The polite way of saying, "You don't belong here, and I'm giving you a chance to leave before you figure that out the hard way." "No." He took a slower sip this time, looking around the room the way a hunter studies unfamiliar territory. "This is exactly where I meant to be." That sentence should have worried me more than it did. Nobody comes to the shattered comet on purpose. You end up here because everywhere else turns you away, or because you're looking for the kind of opportunities that only exist in places where authority doesn't ask questions. "I'm looking for someone," the human continued, his voice still casual, like we were discussing the weather. I kept polishing the same glass I'd been polishing for 30 seconds. My hands needed something to do. "Lot of someone's passed through here," I said neutrally. "Captain Ryan Calloway." My blood went cold, all 4 circulatory systems simultaneously, which is impressive when you're a Velkari. Rin Calloway wasn't the kind of being you looked for. He was the kind you prayed never noticed you existed. Calloway didn't just run a crew, he ran a fleet. 30 ships at last count, maybe more. Salvage vessels, gunboats, interceptors, a few repurposed war corvettes with their serial numbers filed off and their weapons very much not filed off. His people controlled 40% of the illegal salvage lanes in the Terminus Belt, had contracts with criminals who made Crag Vex look like a pickpocket. Callaway was the reason entire stations paid protection money, the reason shipping lanes rerouted, the reason smart beings kept their heads down and their mouths shut. And this human, this quiet, polite human sitting at my bar like he'd come to discuss philosophy was looking for him. "You sure about that?" I asked carefully. "Very sure." The human took another sip. "Heard he drinks here sometimes." "Even if that were true," I said slowly, "which I'm neither confirming nor denying, Captain Calloway has 200 crew members, maybe more. He operates out of a fortified compound on asteroid K-17. It's got defense turrets, scanning arrays, enough firepower to vaporize most ships before they get within weapons range." The human nodded like I just told him the bar served food. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm starting here." I stared at him, trying to reconcile the calm expression with the suicidal statement. "What exactly," I asked very carefully, "are you planning to do if you find him?" The human set his glass down, looked at me with those gray eyes that held entirely too much stillness. "Have a conversation." People don't have conversations with Rin Calloway. They have negotiations, confrontations, occasionally funerals. "Then I guess," the human said mildly, "I'll be the exception." That's when Crag noticed him. Crag Vex was a Cranther, which meant he looked like an assault vehicle had learned to talk and decided violence was his primary language. 7 feet 5 inches of dense muscle under segmented armor plates. Thick neck, jaw designed for biting through hull seals. 4 eyes positioned for maximum peripheral vision and minimum blind spots. His kind weren't subtle. Neither was his reputation. For 23 years, Crag had run protection rackets through most of Dock Ring 7. Technically, I paid him not to destroy my establishment. It was a working relationship. He took 60% of my profits. I kept my bar intact and my breathing regular. Everyone stayed professional. He had a record that would have impressed military strategists. 67 fights, 67 wins, 23 confirmed kills. Not because he enjoyed killing, but because some beings didn't understand the economics of surrender. His crew occupied the back corner booth like it was sovereign territory. 5 Cranther. All loyal, all dangerous, all very clear about what happened to beings who didn't show proper respect. And Crag had just noticed the human. I watched his expression change. All 4 eyes narrowing, head tilting slightly, the universal body language of a predator who just spotted something unfamiliar in its hunting ground. For 60 seconds, nobody moved. Not really. They moved like they were pretending to be furniture. That's a survival skill you develop in the Terminus Belt. When violence is about to happen, the smartest thing you can do is become part of the background. Don't make eye contact. Don't look interested. Don't give anyone a reason to remember you were there when the cleanup crew arrives. I'd seen it 100 times, 1,000. Predator spots prey. The room quietly rearranges itself so everyone else doesn't get mistaken for prey. The human didn't rearrange. He sat on his stool like he'd paid rent on it, one hand around his glass, elbow resting on the counter, posture loose, not slumped, not tense, just comfortable. It wasn't bravado. Bravado has a smell. It's loud, desperate. It's what people put on when they're trying to convince themselves they're not afraid. This was something else entirely. This was the calm of someone who didn't need to convince anyone of anything. Crag stood. The scrape of his chair against the metal floor cut through the music like a blade. Every head in the bar angled just slightly in his direction. Nobody wanted to be caught watching, but the attention was there. Pressure, weight, the atmosphere before a storm breaks. He and his crew started walking. 5 Cranther moving in formation, heavy enough that the floor plates vibrated with each step. Their armor clicked softly where segments overlapped. Their belts carried tools that were absolutely not meant for repair work. They weren't rushing. They didn't need to. That's what predators do when they're certain the prey can't escape. They move slowly. Let the fear do half the work. I leaned forward over the counter, keeping my voice low. "Human," I muttered. The human glanced at me, still calm. "Yeah, Cragvex is coming this way." I noticed. "You should leave." He looked down at his glass like he was considering the suggestion. Then he said, mild as anything, "I just got here." That's not a reason to stay. It is if you came somewhere on purpose. Something about the way he said it, like it wasn't a warning or a challenge, but a simple statement of fact, put an unpleasant twist in my gut. "What are you doing here?" I asked quietly. The human didn't answer right away. He took another sip instead, savored it. Then he looked at me with those gray eyes that held entirely too much quiet, waiting for someone. Who? Doesn't matter yet. That was not comforting. Crag reached the bar and stopped directly behind the human. The difference in their size was absurd. Crag towered over him like a wall of muscle and plates, like a building given legs and attitude. The human didn't turn around. Crag's voice boomed through the room, loud enough that everyone heard it whether they wanted to or not. Hey, tiny pink thing, you lost. Silence hit the bar like a door slamming shut. Even the music seemed to fade into the background, reduced to a dull vibration you felt more than heard. The human continued sipping his drink. I closed my eyes for half a second. Not a prayer. We don't do prayers out here. More like a moment of mourning from my floor, my furniture, and whatever unfortunate creature was about to be carried out in pieces. Crag leaned closer, looming. I'm talking to you, meat sack. The human finally turned, slowly, like he had all the time in the galaxy. He looked up at Crag's faceplates, studied him for a brief second, and then said evenly, I heard you. Crag's plates darkened. A warning sign in Cranther biology. Increased blood flow. Preparation for violence. Then why didn't you answer? The human tilted his head slightly. Didn't hear a question. Just heard you making noise. A few beings near the back actually choked on their drinks. I did something worse. I laughed. It burst out of me. Sharp. Involuntary. Because in 200 cycles, I had never heard anyone speak to Crag Vex like he was an inconvenience. Like he was background static. Like he fundamentally didn't matter. Crag turned his head just enough that one of his eyes locked on me. My laughter died instantly. He turned back to the human. You think you're funny. The human took another sip. I think, he said calmly, you're standing too close. The room tightened. You could feel it. That moment before violence when the air itself seems to compress. When every being with functional survival instincts starts calculating exit routes and blast radii. Crag's crew shifted, spreading slightly, creating a loose semicircle. Surrounding. Containing. Tactical positioning that came from years of doing this exact thing to beings who didn't show proper respect. And Crag genius that he was reached down with one massive hand toward the human's shoulder. If the human had flinched, this might have ended differently. If he'd begged, if he'd shown even a flicker of fear, Crag might have enjoyed the game longer, extended the humiliation, made it a lesson for everyone watching. But the human didn't flinch. He just sighed, softly, like a man bothered by bad weather. And that's when I realized something very important. Crag thought he was starting a bar fight. The human looked like he was about to finish one. What happened next took 90 seconds. I know because I counted. When you're Velkari, you process time differently. 4 separate neural clusters, each tracking different streams of information simultaneously. So while one part of my brain was screaming to duck, another was counting heartbeats, and a third was cataloging exactly how many ways this could go catastrophically wrong. The fourth part just watched. Crag's hand came down like a loading dock clamp. Big, confident, certain. The kind of grab you use when you've spent your entire life being the largest problem in the room. The human moved, not with frantic speed, not with the desperate energy of someone trying to survive, with the practiced efficiency of someone trying not to spill a drink. He slipped out of the grab by turning his shoulder just a fraction. Barely a motion, honestly. Maybe 3 inches. Just enough that Crag's fingers closed on empty air before the Cranther's brain could catch up to what his hand had failed to do. The human rotated his body and drove a sharp elbow into the inside of Crag's forearm, right into a seam between armor plates, the vulnerable spot where flexibility meets protection and neither wins. Crag made a sound that shouldn't come from anything that size. Half yelp, half roar. His arms spasmed hard enough that I heard tendons snap against the plating. The kind of organic machinery failure that meant weeks of recovery if you were lucky. The human didn't pause to admire his work. His leg hooked behind Crag's ankle, his other foot planted on the floor like an anchor. Then he twisted. It wasn't strength, it was physics, leverage, understanding exactly where to apply pressure and when. Nearly 340 pounds of armored arrogance went down. That's when Crag hit my floor. That's when the bottles rattled. That's when the glass tipped over. And that's when the silence started. The human straightened, casual, like he'd just shifted in his seat. He checked his glass, still full. He took a sip, Then he looked down at Crag, who was blinking at the ceiling like he was trying to remember how consciousness worked. I told you, the human said mildly. You were standing too close. For half a heartbeat, nobody moved. Not the patrons, not Crag's crew, not even Crag, who seemed to be having a philosophical crisis about gravity and his relationship with it. Then Tor, one of Crag's lieutenants, younger and considerably stupider than the rest, recovered first. He yanked a plasma cutter from his belt and snapped it up toward the human's chest. The tool whined. Building charge. In about 2 seconds, it would be hot enough to cut through hull plating. My instincts caught up, and I found my voice. No energy weapons in my bar, I barked. Louder than I meant to. Tor didn't look at me. He was staring at the human with that wild, offended anger that comes from watching your entire worldview get kicked in the teeth. You just made the biggest mistake of your short life, Tor growled. The human's face stayed calm. That's statistically unlikely, he said. I've made a lot of mistakes. Tor's finger tightened. The cutter began to whine higher, building toward discharge. The human's hand flicked. Something small and metallic snapped through the air, too fast for most eyes to track. I caught it because Valkyrie vision processes motion across multiple spectrums. A knife, not a flashy blade, not a ceremonial weapon. A simple tool thrown with the indifferent precision of someone tossing keys onto a table. It struck the plasma cutter's exposed power cell. Dead center. The cutter sparked, hissed, and died in Tor's hand like a creature choking on its own breath. Tor stared at it, then stared at the knife buried in the cell housing, then stared at the human. 17 feet. The throw had covered 17 feet, while the human was standing, in low gravity, and hit a target approximately 2 inches in diameter. The realization crawled across Tor's face like something with too many legs. This wasn't luck. The human glanced at me over his shoulder, actually looked apologetic. House rules, he said. I'll clean up. I was about to say something, probably something stupid. But the other 3 Kranther finally decided they had to do something to save face. They rushed him all at once, which is what you do when you don't know what you're doing. Pile mass onto a problem and hope it goes away. I've seen hundreds of bar fights. Most are messy, loud, flailing, bodies colliding with furniture, fists connecting with faces. The chaotic sprawl of beings who never learned proper combat technique, trying to hurt each other through enthusiasm alone. This wasn't a bar fight. This was a demonstration. The human moved through them like water through cracked stone, finding gaps, slipping between angles, turning every attempted grab into a mistake they'd regret for weeks. One Kranther swung wide with a heavy fist. The human stepped inside the arc, close enough that the punch had no space to build power. He drove a palm strike into the underside of the Kranther's jaw seam. Armor didn't help when the weak point was the body inside it. The Kranther staggered back, choking. Another grab for the human's shoulder. The human let the hand land, just long enough to take the grip. Then he used it as leverage, pivoting, throwing the Kranther into his own teammate. 2 bodies collided, plates cracked. Someone hit a table hard enough that it folded. The 3rd Kranther charged with the dead plasma cutter like it was still dangerous, like momentum would substitute for function. The human took a half step to the side, swept the Kranther's legs with a low kick that looked lazy but landed perfectly. Physics again, understanding center of gravity and how to make it irrelevant. The Kranther hit the floor. The human dropped a knee onto the nerve cluster at the base of the Kranther's neck, just enough pressure. The Kranther stopped moving. Not dead, just switched off. The 4th tried to get behind him. Smart, except the human's elbow snapped backward into the throat seam before the Kranther completed the flanking maneuver. A wet sound, a strangled gasp. The Kranther collapsed, clutching his neck. And just like that, it was over. 90 seconds, maybe less. 5 Kranther, one of the nastiest crews in the Terminus belt. On my floor, groaning, bleeding, reconsidering every decision that had brought them to this moment. The human brushed dust off his jacket, checked his glass. Miraculously, it still hadn't spilled. He sat back down on the stool like the violence had been an annoying interruption to his evening. The entire bar was dead silent. He looked at me. Can I get some water too? He asked politely. Hydration's important. I poured water with hands I was mildly embarrassed to realize were shaking. Set it down in front of him. Then I leaned in, voice low, because whatever he wasn't just passing through. What the hell are you? I asked. He took a sip of water, then looked at me with those calm gray eyes. Just a guy, he said, having a drink. No, I whispered. Nobody is just anything who walks in here and does that. He considered my words like they were fair, then nodded once. My name's Silas Brennan, he said, and I'm looking for Captain Ryn Calloway. Before I could respond, before I could process what that meant or why it terrified me, the front door hissed open. 6 figures stepped inside. Black composite armor, the kind military contractors wore when they wanted to intimidate without officially representing anyone. Plasma carbines held low but ready, moving in formation that covered every exit, every angle, every possible blind spot. Professional, real professional. The kind of training that costs more than my bar is worth. They spread across the room. Nobody breathed. The patrons who just witnessed Silas dismantle Craig's crew were now watching something potentially worse unfold. The lead soldier stepped forward. Tall, skeletal frame. Zerithian, if I had to guess. His voice came through a translator as cold and precise as surgical steel. We're looking for the human called Silas Brennan. Every eye in the bar turned toward the stool at my counter. Silas raised his hand, polite, like answering roll call in school. That's me. The soldier studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. You will come with us. Silas didn't look surprised. Captain Calloway. Yes. Silas drained the rest of his water, stood up slowly. Convenient. I grabbed his arm with 2 of my hands. Couldn't help myself. This is a trap, I hissed. They're going to kill you. Silas looked down at my grip, then at me. No fear, no concern. Just that same terrible calm. They'll try. You just took down 5 Cranther. That's not the same as walking into Calloway's compound surrounded by armed escorts. He patted my hand gently, actually reassuring. They're going to take me directly to him, Silas said. That's what I want. You could run. Sure. You should. Silas smiled, small, tired, like he'd had this conversation before. But then I'd have to find him myself. He stretched his arms once, loose and relaxed, like someone warming up before exercise. Then he looked at the armed escort. Well, he said pleasantly, lead the way. The soldiers gestured toward the door. Silas walked past them like he'd been invited to dinner. Right before he stepped outside, he paused, looked back at me. Oh, he said, casually, don't clean up those Cranther yet. I blinked. What? He nodded toward Cragg and his battered crew. When I get back, he said, I'm buying them all a drink. Then the airlock door closed behind him, and Silas Brennan disappeared into the night with 6 armed mercenaries who were almost certainly escorting him to his execution. I stood behind my bar for a long moment, staring at the empty doorway. Around me, the patrons slowly started breathing again. Conversations resumed, carefully, quietly, like people afraid of waking something that might still be sleeping. Cragg managed to sit up, groaning, one hand on his head where it had met my floor. What, he rasped, was that thing? I poured myself a drink. Something strong. Human, I said quietly. Cragg spat blood onto the floor. Humans are supposed to be weak. I looked at the door Silas had walked through, at the Cranther scattered across my floor, at the knife still embedded in the plasma cutter's power cell. Maybe, I said slowly, we've been hearing the wrong stories. The first hour after Silas left was the worst. Waiting is dangerous in a place like the Terminus Belt. Waiting gives people time to imagine things. And imagination, when you're surrounded by criminals and smugglers who've seen what the galaxy can do to soft bodies, tends to lean toward unpleasant outcomes. I stood behind my bar polishing the same glass for the 3rd time while my mind replayed the last 10 minutes over and over. A human, a quiet, polite human who just walked willingly into the headquarters of a mercenary warlord with enough firepower to conquer small colonies. And he'd done it with the casual confidence of someone going out to buy groceries. Across the room, Cragg Vex and his crew were slowly recovering from their education. One of them groaned and tried to sit up, hand pressed to his throat where Silas's elbow had introduced itself to soft tissue. Another was cradling his twisted arm like it might fall off if he let go. Cragg himself leaned against the wall, rubbing the side of his head. Every few minutes he glanced toward the door, not with anger, with something closer to confusion, like his entire understanding of physics had been revised without his permission. You said he's human, Cragg muttered eventually. His voice was rough, damaged. That's what he told me. That wasn't human fighting. You volunteered for the demonstration, I reminded him. He grunted, shifted his weight, winced. Tor, the one who'd pulled the plasma cutter, was staring at the knife still embedded in the ruined power cell. He hadn't moved in 15 minutes. Just stared. like he was trying to solve a mathematical equation that kept changing variables. He hit the power cell, Tor whispered. Not to me, not to anyone, just stating a fact to the universe. I saw that, I said, from across the room. Yes. With a throw. Yes, Tor swallowed. That's not normal. Before I could answer, a voice from the back of the bar spoke up. Old. Dry. Like wind over dead leaves. Humans aren't normal. Everyone turned. The speaker was Varix, a Torellian trader who'd been quietly nursing the same drink for most of the evening. Varix was old, not just old in years, but old in the way beings get when they've traveled too far and seen too much. 180 cycles by his species' reckoning. Most of it spent traveling between frontier stations collecting rumors and relics and stories that nobody else believed. If anyone in the room knew strange truths about the galaxy, it would be him. What do you mean, someone asked. A Keleth miner, voice uncertain. Varix tapped the rim of his glass thoughtfully. 3 fingers, deliberate, like he was counting something only he could see. I've heard things, he said. Stories from frontier colonies where humans settled first. Stories from traders who do business in soul space. Stories that most beings dismiss as exaggeration or propaganda. Crag snorted, blood on his lips. Stories. The trader shrugged, 6 shoulders moving in sequence. Maybe, but stories usually start somewhere real. They grow from seeds of truth, even if the tree looks strange later. He leaned forward slightly. His 6 eyes reflected the bar lights like distant stars. There was a human cargo freighter, Varix began, boarded by pirates near the outer reach, the Demeter's bounty, hauling agricultural equipment and colonist supplies. 12 humans on the crew. 40 Grecian raiders. Someone laughed nervously. Let me guess. The pirates won. Varix smiled slowly, the kind of smile that has teeth hidden behind it. No, he said. The humans did. The room quieted. They had no combat armor, Varix continued. His voice took on the quality of someone reciting scripture. No military training, no weapons beyond what you'd find in any cargo bay. Wrenches, cargo loaders, emergency repair tools. Nothing designed to kill. He paused, took a sip of his drink. The raiders boarded expecting easy prey. Soft colonists, terrified civilians. The kind of beings who surrender when you point a gun at them. And so, the Keleth miner again, leaning forward now. The humans cut power to sections 3, 7, and 11, trapped the pirates in absolute darkness. No emergency lights, no backup systems. Just void black metal corridors where every sound echoes and you can't tell if something's 3 feet away or 30. Varix's eyes glinted. They vented atmosphere in Section 9, controlled decompression. 8 pirates dead before they understood what was happening. The humans used gravity manipulation, turned it off in some sections, doubled it in others. The Grecians couldn't adapt. Their biology isn't flexible like that. They need consistent conditions. Someone near the bar muttered something in a language I didn't recognize. The humans turned cargo containers into kinetic weapons, Varix continued. Used the ship's loading systems to accelerate half-ton crates down corridors at speeds that turned bodies into physics problems. He set his glass down. Precise. Careful. When authorities arrived 2 hours and 17 minutes later, all 40 pirates were dead. All 12 humans were alive, 3 injured, none critically. The silence that followed had weight to it. That's impossible, someone said, but their voice suggested they weren't entirely convinced. Maybe, Varix said, or maybe we don't understand what humans are capable of when survival becomes non-negotiable. Across the room, another patron spoke up, a Keleth prospector I'd seen around the station. She worked the outer belt mines, quiet, professional, not prone to exaggeration. I heard something similar, she said. Her voice carried through the bar. Human colony on the edge of the Orion Fringe, place called New Denver. 8,000 colonists, farmers, engineers, teachers, nobody military. She shifted in her seat. The light caught the mining scars on her arms. A warlord named Thrax tried to extort them, demanded 10 million credits in tribute. Standard protection racket, pay or burn. They paid, someone asked. They said no. That got attention. Thrax attacked with 50 ships, enough firepower to glass a continent. He expected the colony to surrender or die within hours. The Keleth paused, remembering. The colonists were farmers, she repeated, but they had mining equipment, industrial drills, fusion reactors, civilian shuttles, nothing designed for war. What did they do? They converted the drills into artillery. mounted them on elevated platforms. Those things have a range of 400 kilometers. They rigged fusion reactors as orbital mines. 23 deployed in defensive patterns. They coordinated like they'd been training for years. Communication discipline that would make fleet officers proud. She looked around the room. And they baited Thrax into an asteroid field they'd pre-mined with explosives. Industrial charges meant for excavation. Except when 300 tons of rock accelerates to terminal velocity, excavation looks a lot like warfare. How many ships did Thrax lose? Crag asked. His voice was quiet now. 28. The battle lasted 4 hours and 3 minutes. He retreated with what was left of his fleet and never came back. The Keleth finished her drink. Farmers became generals in 90 days, she said, because the alternative was extinction. I poured myself another drink. My hands were steadier now, but only because I was actively controlling them. A third voice joined the conversation. Human voice, actually. One of the 17 humans who lived on the station, a woman named Torres, maintenance tech, kept to herself mostly. The plague ship, she said quietly. Everyone turned. Human colony ship, the Perseverance, 5,000 colonists in cryo, heading for a settlement world in the far rim, got infected with Vortac plague somewhere in deep space. I knew about Vortac plague. Nasty. Biological weapon left over from some war nobody remembered anymore. 95% mortality rate for most species. No known cure. The Galactic Council quarantined them, Torres continued, isolated them in space, told them to wait for help that wasn't coming, because there was no help. Vortac plague doesn't have a cure, never has. So they died, someone said. No. Torres looked up. They synthesized a cure. The bar went very quiet. How? I asked. They analyzed the plague genome. Took them 3 days working with the ship's medical equipment. Then they synthesized antibodies from the algae they were growing in the bioreactor for food production. Cross-referenced it with human immune response patterns. Tested it, refined it, distributed it. She spoke like she was reading from a report. 5,000 colonists, 4,847 survived. 153 odd before the cure could reach everyone. I couldn't find the words. Impossible. Torres smiled, not happy, just acknowledging something. The council said the same thing, told them Vortac plague had no cure. The humans said incorrect. It had no cure. Past tense. What happened to them all? They completed their journey, founded the colony. Last I heard, they're developing vaccines for 6 other incurable diseases. She paused, just to see if they can. A fourth voice spoke up, a Zerithian trader named Kess who ran shipping routes through council space. The hostage negotiation, Kess said. Her translator rendered the words with careful precision. Happened about 3 years ago. 2 factions had been at war for 5 centuries. The Krell Empire and the Thrain Collective. 500 years of violence. Billions dead. She leaned forward. A human diplomat named Kira Halstead was assigned to broker peace. Everyone said it was impossible, that the hatred ran too deep, that nothing would work. What did she do? Someone asked. She locked both delegation leaders in a conference room, sealed the doors, 47 hours, 1 room, 1 bathroom, no food, just water. A few beings laughed nervously. She told them you can kill each other or you can use the toilet. Your choice, but nobody leaves until you sign something or someone dies. Kess's expression softened. Hour 46, they signed a ceasefire. Hour 48, a full treaty. The war ended because a human made basic biological needs more inconvenient than compromise. Someone muttered appreciation. Humans weaponize inconvenience, Kess said. They understand that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't a gun. It's discomfort. A fifth patron spoke. An old maintenance engineer I'd seen working the dock systems. His species I couldn't place. The stranded ship, he said quietly. The Perseverance Mark II. Different ship, same name. Philosophy. Lost FTL capability 40 light years from the nearest system. 200 crew. Supplies for maybe 6 months if they rationed hard. They died, someone asked, though the tone suggested they knew better. No. The engineer smiled. Chief engineer was a human named Lorne Thatcher. He took one look at the dead drive core and said, "We're not dying out here." What did he do? Rebuilt the entire FTL system using cargo bay parts, shuttle engine components, and duct tape. Actual duct tape. The adhesive bonding strip humans use for everything. That got attention. He worked for 87 days straight, slept 4 hours every 3rd day. The crew said he talked to the machinery like it was alive, coaxed it, threatened it, promised it glory if it just worked one more time. The engineer's voice carried genuine awe. Day 87, he activated the rebuilt drive. It shouldn't have worked. The tolerances were wrong. The power distribution was improvised. The whole thing violated 16 different engineering principles. And that it worked. Got them home. The ship's in a museum now. Engineers from 40 species have studied it. None of them can explain how it functioned. One human just said, "We needed it to work, so it did." He shook his head. Humans don't just fix the broken, they fix the unfixable. Out of spite. I was about to pour another drink when Varric spoke again. His voice had changed, taken on a different quality, like he was about to say something he'd been holding back. "You know what all these stories have in common?" he asked. Nobody answered. Every species in this galaxy evolved with something hunting them. Predators, environmental hazards, diseases, things that taught them fear, taught them when to run, when to hide, when to submit. He stood slowly, old joints protesting. Humans evolved on Earth, a Class 12 death world. Know what that classification means. It means the planet itself was the predator. Weather that could end civilizations. Geological instability, solar radiation, predators in every ecosystem. Venoms, parasites, bacteria that could kill in hours. Varric looked around the room, making eye contact with each being who'd listen. And you know what the difference is with humans? Silence. They weren't the prey. The words hung in the air like smoke. They were the apex predator, the thing at the top, the species that hunted the hunters, that killed the killers, that looked at a planet trying to murder them and said, "No, we're staying." He sat back down. "Evolution doesn't forget that," Varric said quietly. 200,000 years of being the most dangerous thing in their environment. You don't erase that with 50 years of diplomacy and trade agreements. Craig's hand was trembling. I could see it from across the room. For the first time in 23 years, Craig Vex understood something fundamental about his place in the galaxy. He hadn't fought a person. He'd fought 200,000 years of selective pressure that had turned cooperation into a survival strategy and violence into a precision tool. "So when you ask what that human was," Varric said, looking at me directly, "the answer is simple. He's human, and humans problem-solve extinction." The transport touched down in asteroid K-17's primary hangar with barely a shudder. Professional pilots. Silas appreciated that, the kind of competence that came from doing dangerous work long enough to get good at it. 6 guards in formation, 23 visible defense turrets through the viewport, 11 corridor junctions between the hangar and wherever they were taking him. He counted automatically. Old habits. The lead Zerithian gestured. "This way." They moved through the compound. Silas observed everything. Guard rotations, power conduit placements, emergency bulkhead positions, the layout of a military installation that someone had tried to disguise as a salvage operation. 427 personnel if his estimates were right, maybe more. All of them knew their business. The corridors opened into a command center. Holographic displays showed fleet positions, trade routes, salvage claims. And there, studying a tactical projection, stood a man Silas hadn't seen in 8 years. Captain Ryn Calloway turned around. 6'3", gray hair at the temples where it had been dark before, a scar across his left cheek from Titan Ridge, eyes that had seen too much and decided to see more anyway. For a moment, neither man spoke. Then Calloway smiled, tired, genuine. "Silas Brennan, 7th Marine Recon Battalion, service number 2847 Golf. You took a shot from 1,247 meters that saved my life." He paused. "It's been 8 years, Lieutenant." 7 years, 4 months, Captain." Silas kept his voice level. "You always said precision mattered." "I did." Calloway gestured to the guards. "Leave us." The Zerithian hesitated. "Sir, I know what he is. Leave us." They left, the door sealed. Silence held for 3 heartbeats. "You came to warn me," Calloway said. "Not a question. The council wants you dead. 500,000 credits. They hired me. And them." "I refused. Came to tell you they're coming anyway. Different contractor. Maybe multiple teams." Calloway nodded slowly, like he'd expected this. "The evidence. 3 colonies, 47,000 dead. You found proof." "I did." Calloway pulled up a holographic file. "New Providence, Genesis Harbor, Terra Nova, council ships, council authorization codes. Financial records showing payment to the syndicate to claim responsibility." Silas studied the data. "Verified, cross-referenced, irrefutable. You're planning to release it?" "I am." "That starts a civil war." "Maybe." Calloway met his eyes. "Or maybe it starts accountability. Depends on how many beings care about truth." Silas considered. 8 years ago, Calloway had taught him that violence was a tool. That honor meant using it precisely. That the hardest battles weren't the ones you fought, but the ones you chose not to fight. You'll need a broadcast network, something they can't shut down. Calloway's expression shifted, hope maybe, or relief. You're helping. You taught me to stand for something. Seems like a bad time to forget that lesson. Before Calloway could respond, alarms shrieked through the compound. Red emergency lights strobed. The tactical display lit up with proximity warnings. Report, Calloway barked into his comm. 6 Council warships just dropped out of FTL Dreadnought class. They're hailing, demanding immediate surrender. Calloway looked at Silas. They tracked you. No. Silas shook his head. I came dark. They've been tracking you. I just gave them a reason to move now. Another alarm. Shields at 87% and holding. They're charging weapons. Estimate 14 minutes to breach if we don't respond. Calloway straightened. Command posture. Battle stations. Evacuate non-combat personnel. Get those civilians to the shuttles. He turned to Silas. You should go. This isn't your fight. You taught me another thing, Captain. Silas picked up a rifle from the weapon rack. Checked the charge. Never leave a man behind. Calloway almost smiled. Let's get that broadcast set up first. If we're going down, the truth goes out. They worked. Fast, precise. The coordination of 2 people who trained together, who understood each other's rhythm. 15 minutes of setup. Encryption protocols. Redundant relay points. Broadcast nodes scattered across 40 systems. Make it impossible to shut down. Done, Silas said. Signals distributed. You hit that button, 12 billion beings see everything. Good. Calloway sealed the data core. Now we survived long enough to press it. The compound shuddered. The first impact. Shields at 34%. Then the real fight began. 3 hours and 47 minutes had passed since Silas walked out of my bar. The station news feeds were running stories now. An explosion at asteroid K-17. Council forces claiming they'd destroyed a pirate stronghold. Casualties unknown. No survivors reported. The bar was packed. 103 patrons now. Overcrowded. Fire code meant nothing this far from regulation. Word had spread through the station networks about the human who'd walked into the shattered comet and dismantled Kragvex's crew in 90 seconds. Everyone wanted to see what happened next. Betting pools had formed. Illegal technically, but I allowed them. The odds on Silas coming back alive were 20 to 1. Most beings thought we'd never see him again. That he'd died in the explosion. That he'd been executed. That whatever plan he'd had, it had ended badly. I wasn't so sure. Something about the way he'd walked out. The way he'd told me to keep the Cranther crew here. The way he'd said when I get back instead of if. The door hissed open. Conversations died mid-sentence. Silas Brennan walked in. Alone. Unharmed. His jacket was torn. Face dirty. Blood on his hands that probably wasn't his. But he was walking steady. No limp. No visible injuries. Just that same quiet competence he'd carried when he first arrived. The bar didn't go silent with shock this time. It went silent with something closer to reverence. He'd gone to confront a warlord who commanded 427 soldiers, who operated out of a fortress carved into solid rock, who had defense systems that could vaporize ships, and he'd come back. On his feet. Silas walked straight to the bar, sat on the same stool, looked at me with those gray eyes that held too much stillness. I believe, he said calmly, I promised drinks. He set down a credit chip, the kind that holds significant amounts of money. That should cover it. My hands were shaking again. All 6 of them. I poured Torelli and amber with trembling fingers. What happened? I managed. Silas took the glass, considered the question, then gave me an answer that wasn't really an answer at all. Captain Calloway and I reached an understanding. Old friends do that. Old friends. The words hung there begging for explanation. But before I could ask, Cragg stood up. Slowly, carefully, like testing whether his legs remembered their function. He walked toward the bar, his crew tensed, hands near weapons, not sure if this was reconciliation or round 2. The entire establishment held its breath. Cragg stopped 3 feet from Silas, looked down at him, all 7 feet 5 inches of battered Cranther pride trying to decide something important. Then he extended his hand, a peace gesture, universal, recognized across dozens of species and cultures, the offering of vulnerability. I owe you an apology, Silas said before Cragg could speak. I embarrassed you in front of your crew. That was necessary, but it wasn't respectful. Let me buy you all a drink. Cragg stared at the extended hand, at the human who'd put him on the floor in less than 5 seconds. For 17 seconds, nobody moved. I counted. Then Cragg reached out and took Silas's hand. You fight with honor, Cragg said. His voice was rough, damaged, but sincere. Even when you don't have to. Silas shook firmly. You fight with courage, even when you should run. Crag laughed, actual laughter, deep, genuine, the kind that comes from recognizing truth. They drank together. Silas, Crag, the 5 crew members who could still stand without assistance. I served rounds. Tyrrellian amber, Threxian whiskey, something clear and dangerous that the Cranther preferred. The kind of drinking that follows violence when both sides have decided respect is more valuable than grudges. Stories were exchanged, not the full story, not yet, but pieces, fragments. Silas told a sanitized version of his encounter with Calloway, enough to satisfy curiosity without revealing operational details. He spoke like someone who'd been doing dangerous work for a long time and understood the value of discretion. The crew told stories about past fights, past jobs, the kind of war stories that criminals tell when they're trying to establish common ground. And somewhere in the third round, when the alcohol had softened the edges and the tension had drained out of the room, I caught Silas's eye. He nodded toward the back. Private conversation territory. I followed him to a corner booth, away from listening ears. I need to tell you something, Silas said quietly, because you're going to find out anyway, and I'd rather you hear it from me. I'm listening. I was hired to kill Rin Calloway. 500,000 credits. Client was Council Black Operations. They wanted him dead because he has proof of war crimes. Evidence that could collapse governments. My blood temperature dropped several degrees. You're telling me you're an assassin? Was, Silas corrected. Past tense. I refused the contract. Came here to warn Calloway instead. Why? He looked at me with those gray eyes. Because 8 years ago, Captain Calloway was my commanding officer. He taught me everything I know about tactics, combat, survival. And when I saw what the council wanted him dead for, I realized they were the criminals, not him. What did he do? He found proof that the council glassed 3 human colonies, 47,293 people, blamed it on syndicate attacks, paid the syndicate to attack their own colonies, to create a threat they could rally against. I felt sick. That's war crimes, Silas finished, the kind that start civil wars, that collapse institutions, that make entire populations question everything they've been told. What are you going to do? Calloway's going to release the evidence, broadcast it across every system simultaneously, make it impossible to suppress or deny. He paused, and I helped him set up the transmission network. The council will kill you both. They'll try. That phrase again, delivered with the same terrible calm. Why come back here? I asked. You're a target now, both of you. Silas smiled, small, tired, because I made a promise, to buy Crag and his crew drinks, and because running never solved anything. My species learned that 200,000 years ago. Before I could respond, every screen in the bar suddenly activated, all of them, simultaneously. The music cut out, replaced by a transmission signal that overrode local controls. A face appeared, human, male, early 40s, gray hair at the temples, a scar across his left cheek that looked like it had been earned in close combat. Captain Rin Calloway. This is Captain Rin Calloway. The transmission began. His voice was calm, measured, the kind of voice that commanded fleets and expected to be obeyed. For too long, the Galactic Council has operated in darkness, has made decisions without oversight, has committed acts that violate every treaty, every principle, every promise they claim to uphold. The screen shifted. Video footage. Council warships, distinctive markings, moving into position above a planet. These are council vessels, Calloway's voice continued, positioning above the human colony of New Providence, population 18,000, date 4 years ago. Official record states this colony was attacked by syndicate raiders. That council forces arrived too late to prevent casualties. The footage continued. Weapons firing, not at incoming ships, at the planet's surface, at the colony. This is what actually happened. The glassing lasted 43 seconds on the recording. Plasma bombardment that turned settlement structures into molten craters, agricultural zones into glass fields, residential sectors into thermal graves. The bar was absolutely silent. 18,000 dead, Calloway said. The council blamed the syndicate, paid them 200 million credits to claim responsibility, created a threat to rally against, a justification for military expansion. More footage, 2 more colonies, same pattern. New Providence, Genesis Harbor, Terra Nova, 3 colonies, 47,293 confirmed deaths, all blamed on external threats, all committed by the Council. The screen showed financial records, communication logs, orders with Council authorization codes. I am releasing this evidence to every system in the network. 12 billion beings will see this. The Council cannot deny it, cannot suppress it, cannot escape accountability. Calloway's face returned. To the Council, your crimes are now public. To the galaxy, demand better. Demand accountability. Demand truth. The transmission cut. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then every screen in the bar lit up again. Different signal. Council emergency broadcast. A counselor appeared. Erkathi, senior member. Her face was rigid with controlled fury. The transmission you just witnessed is terrorist propaganda. Rin Calloway is a wanted criminal, guilty of piracy, murder, and sedition. A bounty of 10 million credits is hereby placed on his capture. Dead or alive. She paused, looked directly into the camera. Silas Brennan, known associate and accomplice, is wanted for conspiracy and aiding a terrorist organization. Bounty 5 million credits. Dead or alive. The transmission ended. Every being in my bar turned to look at Silas. 5 million credits. That was more money than most beings would see in a lifetime. Enough to buy a ship, a station, a small moon if you negotiated well. 30 beings stood, slowly, blocking exits, hands moving toward weapons as the mathematics were simple. 1 human, 5 million credits, 30 armed beings versus 1. Silas sat at the bar, calm, sipping his drink like nothing had changed. Then Cragg stood, his chair scraped against the floor, loud in the sudden tension. Anyone who touches the human, Cragg said quietly, answers to me. His crew stood with him. 5 Cranther, all battered, body bruised, all willing to fight for someone who'd put them on the floor hours ago. The standoff held for 34 seconds. Then one by one the beings who'd stood sat back down. Hands moved away from weapons. Eyes looked anywhere except at the 5 million credit bounty sitting at my bar. Because nobody wanted to fight Craig's crew. And because everyone had seen what Silas could do in 90 seconds. And because somewhere in the last 4 hours, something had shifted. Something fundamental about how these beings viewed the quiet human who kept his promises. Silas looked at Cragg, genuine surprise on his face. You don't have to do this. Cragg's laugh was rough, damaged, but real. You bought me a drink, he said. I'm returning the favor. The tension broke like a wave hitting rock. Beings who'd stood sat back down. Not quickly, not with the shame of cowards, but with the practical wisdom of survivors who understood that 5 million credits wasn't worth dying over. Not when the target had already proven what he could do with his hands. Not when Cragg Vex and his entire crew had positioned themselves as obstacles. The mathematics had changed. 1 human plus 5 Cranther versus 30 assorted criminals equaled a problem nobody wanted to solve tonight. Silas looked at Cragg, really looked at him. Like he was seeing something he hadn't expected to find in a place like this. Thank you, Silas said quietly. Cragg shrugged. The gesture looked strange on a frame that large, like watching a building try to express humility. You gave me respect, Cragg said. Even when you didn't have to, even when I was threatening you. He paused. Honor recognizes honor. Silas raised his glass. Cragg raised his. They drank. And in that moment watching them, I understood something about humans that all the stories and legends had missed. They didn't just survive extinction events. They turned enemies into allies. They transformed violence into understanding. They weaponized respect. Silas checked the time on a device built into his jacket sleeve. The gesture was casual, but I caught the tension in his shoulders, the slight tightening around his eyes. How long do we have? I asked. He looked at me, decided I deserved the truth. 23 minutes, maybe less. The council broadcast triangulated my position when it aired. They'll have response teams en route, fast ships, military grade. You need to leave. Yes, but he didn't move. Just sat there finishing his drink like he had all the time in the universe. Aren't you worried? I asked. Silas smiled, that small, tired smile that suggested he'd been worried for so long that it had become background noise. Always, he said, but worry doesn't change the timeline, and I made a promise to buy drinks. Breaking promises worries me more than council death squads. He turned to face the bar, raised his voice just enough to carry. Next round's on me. Everyone. A cheer went up. Genuine. The kind of sound that happens when fear transforms into celebration. When beings decide that if violence is coming anyway, they might as well drink first. I started pouring, all 6 hands working, bottles flowing, glasses filling. Silas watched the room, that same observational quality he'd carried when he first walked in, but softer now, like he was memorizing something worth remembering. "You changed this place," I said quietly, handing him a fresh glass. "Did I? 3 hours ago, Crag was ready to kill you for disrespect. Now he's ready to die for you. That's not normal." "Maybe," Silas said. "People just needed permission to be better than they thought they were." He said it like it was simple, like profound philosophy was just common sense spoken clearly. The drinks kept flowing. The celebration built. Beings who'd been ready to collect bounties were now toasting the target. The cognitive dissonance should have been jarring. But somehow in the chaos of the shattered comet, it made perfect sense. Crag approached the bar. His crew followed. Moving easier now. Alcohol or adrenaline or both working as painkiller. "We'll cover your exit," Crag said, not offering, stating. We know we don't have to." Crag's voice was firm. "We want to. There's a difference." Silas studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Acceptance. Council forces will have gunships, maybe a frigate if they're serious. You'll be outgunned." "We're always outgunned," Crag said. "Hasn't stopped us yet. They'll ask if you've seen me. We'll tell them the truth. A human came into the bar, bought us drinks, left. We have no idea where he went." Silas's smile widened. "That is technically accurate. The best kind of accurate." They gripped hands again. That same warrior's acknowledgement. The recognition of shared danger and mutual respect. "If you ever need anything," Crag said seriously, "you know where to find me." "Same," Silas replied. Then he turned to me. We moved to the corner booth. Private space. The bar noise provided cover, but I activated the sound dampener anyway. Old habit from 200 cycles of listening to conversations people didn't want overheard. Silas pulled out the credit chip he'd set on the bar earlier, placed it on the table. 5,000 credits, he said, should cover the drinks and any repairs from the earlier demonstration. I looked at the chip, then at him. "That's a month's profit, pure profit, more than I make in a normal cycle." "You provided exactly what I needed," Silas said. "A location, witnesses, and you didn't panic when things got complicated. That's worth more than money." "What did you need witnesses for?" He leaned back. The sound dampener made the world beyond our bubble fuzzy, distant. "People need to see humans keeping promises," Silas said. "Not just hear about it in stories, actually witness it." I said I'd buy Crag drinks when I got back. I got back. I bought drinks. Simple. But it matters. Because it builds trust. Because it proves we're not the monsters the council claims we are, that we have honor codes, that we value integrity over convenience. He paused. "Stories about humans surviving impossible odds make us seem dangerous. Stories about humans keeping their word make us seem trustworthy. Right now, the galaxy needs both." I understood. Reputation warfare. Hearts and minds. The oldest form of combat. "The evidence Calloway released," I said. "It's real, all of it. Every frame, every financial record, every communication log, verified and cross-referenced. The council can't deny it without looking more guilty. They'll try anyway. Of course, but now they're fighting from a defensive position. Explaining rather than dictating. That changes everything." "What happens now?" Silas checked his time again. 17 minutes. "Now I disappear. Calloway coordinates with reformist council members who want to rebuild. Evidence gets delivered to independent investigators. War crimes tribunals begin. The galaxy gets messy for a while. And you? I keep doing what I do, helping people who need help, extracting whistleblowers, protecting witnesses, making sure the truth doesn't die in some council black site." He stood, extended his hand. I took it, all 6 of mine gripping his one. The traditional Valkyrie gesture of deep respect. "Thank you, Vorak, for the drinks, for the space, for not shooting me when I walked in." "The night's not over," I said, trying for humor. "Still time, say." He laughed, genuine. The sound was strange coming from someone who'd spent the evening dismantling gang enforcers and toppling governments. "If I ever get tired of running," Silas said, "I'll come back, buy another round, tell you the full story. I'll keep your stool empty. Don't. Fill it. Keep the bar alive. Keep serving criminals and smugglers and beings who need somewhere to exist without judgment. Places like this matter more than you know. Then he was moving, heading for the door. The crowd parted. Not fear this time. Respect. Beings nodding, some raising glasses. A few even saluting in their species' traditional manner. Crag and his crew fell in around Silas. Escort formation. Professional. They'd cover his exit, run interference if council forces arrived early, buy him seconds or minutes or whatever time they could steal. At the door, Silas paused, looked back. The entire bar was watching. He raised his hand, a simple wave, the gesture of someone saying goodbye to friends, not fleeing from enemies. Then the airlock cycled, and Silas Brennan walked out into the darkness of Dock Ring 7 for the second time that night. The difference was this time nobody thought he wouldn't come back. We just didn't know when. The shattered comet still stands on Dock Ring 7. I still serve drinks to criminal smugglers and beings who exist in the spaces between laws. The music still plays, the air recyclers still hum, the routine continues. But something changed that night. You can see it in small ways, in the interactions, in how beings treat each other when they think nobody's watching. Table 3 Threxian smugglers still argue about cargo routes, but now they invite the Keleth miners to offer opinions. Collaboration instead of isolation. Table 7. Keleth miners still drink away their radiation bonuses, but they share stories now. Build connections. Remember that survival doesn't have to be solitary. And in the back corner, Cragvex's booth still holds his crew. But they're quieter now, more thoughtful, less quick to threaten. Like they learned something about strength that doesn't require constant demonstration. On the wall behind the bar, I posted a new rule, written in 12 languages. Illuminated. Impossible to miss. Rule 4, don't underestimate the quiet ones. Patrons ask about it, new customers especially. They want to know the story. I tell them, every word, every detail, the 90-second fight, the legends exchanged, the broadcast that changed everything. Silas walking out with a 5 million credit bounty on his head and walking back out with allies who'd die for him. The story spreads, mutates, grows. Some versions make Silas 10 feet tall. Others give him supernatural abilities. A few claim he defeated 50 Cranther single-handed. The details blur, but the core remains consistent. A human walked into the most dangerous bar in the Terminus Belt, kept his promises, changed everything. Business is up 340%. Not because beings come for the drinks, though I still pour those. Not because the location improved, because it didn't. Dock Ring 7 is still the worst real estate on Omega 7. They come because this is where it happened, where a human proved that honor still means something, that promises still carry weight, that even in the darkest corners of civilized space integrity can survive. They come because legends need origin points, and the shattered comet is now mythology with a liquor license. The galaxy changed too. The council investigation took 4 months. Independent tribunals. Evidence verification. Testimony from survivors. The process was exhaustive, brutal, public. 7 council members were arrested for war crimes. 3 committed suicide before the warrants could be executed. Personal shame or political calculation, nobody knows. The remaining council members initiated reformation protocols, oversight committees, transparency requirements, accountability measures that should have existed from the beginning. 12 human representatives were elected to council positions. First time in galactic history that humans held significant political power. They ran on platforms of honesty, transparency, and refusing to accept convenient lies. They won in landslides. Captain Ryan Calloway received a full pardon. The bounty was rescinded. His fleet was legitimized as an independent defense force operating under galactic charter to protect frontier settlements. He's currently safeguarding 23 colony systems, the ones too far from council protection, too isolated for traditional security, the places where beings need someone watching their backs. Calloway accepted the responsibility, built infrastructure, trained local defense forces, turned piracy into civic service. Some beings call him a hero, others still call him a criminal. He doesn't seem to care about the labels, just keeps doing the work. And Silas Brennan was never captured. The bounty increased. 5 million became 10 million. 10 became 15 million. The council wants him badly. Dead or alive, though I suspect they'd prefer dead. But Silas has been cited in 40 different systems. Simultaneously. which is physically impossible, suggesting that either he's developed teleportation technology or multiple beings are using his name as protective cover. I think it's the latter. I think Silas Brennan has become more than a person. It's become a symbol, a signal. When someone claims to be Silas, they're saying, I help people. I keep promises. I stand against injustice. The council can't kill an idea. They should have learned that by now. The last confirmed sighting was 3 weeks ago. A human matching Silas's description extracted 17 colonists from a black site operation. Council forces knew he was coming. Set a trap. 50 soldiers, military-grade weapons, prepared positions. He got all 17 colonists out. 0 casualties on the civilian side. 12 council soldiers required medical treatment. He left a message spray-painted on the facility wall. You're getting better. Keep practicing. That's very Silas. Beings ask me sometimes when the bar's quiet and the drinks are flowing and the mood is philosophical, what's the scariest thing you've seen in 200 cycles? They expect me to say Crag Vex before his transformation, or the crime lords who've passed through, or the assassination attempts, or the bar fights that ended with body counts. I tell them the truth. The scariest thing I've ever seen was a human who kept his promises. They laugh, think I'm joking, setting up a punchline. I'm not, because you can negotiate with greed. Credit changes hands, deals get made. There's a transactional logic to it. You can intimidate fear, apply enough pressure and fear breaks, becomes surrender or flight or desperate violence. But it breaks. You can manipulate pride, flatter it, wound it, use it as leverage. Pride is predictable. But a being who keeps their word, no matter who says they'll do something and then does it regardless of consequences, who treats integrity as non-negotiable, that's unstoppable. That's the kind of force that changes galaxies, because it's not about power, not about weapons or ships or soldiers. It's about reliability, about trust, about knowing that when a human says something, they mean it. Silas said he'd buy Crag drinks when he got back. He got back. He bought drinks. Simple, fundamental, revolutionary. That's humanity. That's what makes them dangerous. Not because they're strong. Plenty of species are stronger. Not because they're aggressive. Plenty of species are more violent. Not because they can't be killed. Everything dies eventually. They're dangerous because they're persistent, because they adapt, because they turn enemies into allies and obstacles into opportunities and extinction events into learning experiences. They're dangerous because they refuse to accept that death ends the fight. They're dangerous because they keep their promises. And in a galaxy built on lies, manipulation, and convenient truths, that kind of honesty is the most disruptive force imaginable. It's late now, the bar is closing. Last call happened 20 minutes ago. The stragglers are finishing their drinks. Crag and his crew are settling their tab, actually paying. That's new. I'm wiping down the counter when my communication terminal chimes. Private frequency, encrypted, the kind of signal that usually means trouble. I activate it, audio only, no visual. A voice, human, male, familiar. Vorak, I smile despite myself. Silas, just wanted to check in, make sure you're still alive, that the council hasn't burned down my favorite bar in revenge. Still standing, business is good, your legend is profitable. He laughs, that same quiet sound, like he finds the absurdity amusing. Glad to hear it. Listen, I need a favor. Name it. If anyone asks, you haven't heard from me. This communication never happened. Understood. What are you doing? A pause. I can hear something in the background. Engine noise. Ship systems. 17 more colonists need extraction. Council knows their location. Black site operation. Time sensitive. My blood temperature drops. That's suicide. They'll be waiting for you. They always are. Silas. I know the odds, Vorak. I know the risks, but those 17 people are counting on someone showing up. Someone who keeps promises. You never promised them anything. Humanity did. 50 years ago when we joined the galactic community, we promised to be better, to protect the vulnerable, to stand against tyranny. He pauses. Someone has to keep that promise. I want to argue, to tell him that martyrdom is wasteful, that he's worth more alive than dead, that sacrificing himself won't change the fundamental corruption of the system. But I've learned something in 200 cycles. You can't argue with humans who've decided that something matters. Be careful, I say instead. Always am. And Silas, and yeah, when you get those colonists out, come back. Tell me the story. Have another drink. Deal. The communication ends. I stand there in my empty bar staring at the terminal, wondering if I'll ever see Silas Brennan again, wondering if the galaxy deserves beings like him. Then I look at Rule 4 on the wall. Don't underestimate the quiet ones. And I think about humans, about how they evolved on a planet that tried to kill them and survived anyway, about how they turned cooperation into a survival strategy and violence into a precision tool, about how they keep promises even when it costs everything. The galaxy thinks humans are dangerous because they're unpredictable. The galaxy thinks humans are valuable because they're adaptable. The galaxy thinks humans are strange because they care about things like honor and integrity and keeping their word. The galaxy is wrong about all of it. Humans aren't dangerous because they're unpredictable. They're dangerous because they're reliably themselves. You always know what a human will do. They'll keep their promises. They'll protect the vulnerable. They'll stand against injustice even when it's suicidal. That's what makes them terrifying. That's what changes everything, because in a galaxy built on deception and manipulation and convenient morality, humans introduce a variable that breaks all the equations: truth. And truth, once released, doesn't stop spreading. It doesn't accept defeat. It doesn't compromise. It just keeps going until everyone knows it. That's what Silas Brennan represents. That's what humanity represents. Not violence, not military superiority, not technological advantage, just truth. And the absolute certainty that someone somewhere will keep fighting for it. Somewhere in deep space beyond council jurisdiction, a small ship cuts through the darkness. Inside, Silas Brennan studies a tactical display. 50 council ships in defensive formation around a black site facility. Automated weapons platforms. Scanning arrays. Response teams on standby. 17 colonists inside. Witnesses to war crimes. Scheduled for execution in 6 hours. The odds are impossible. The mathematics don't work. Logic says he can't succeed. Silas plots his approach anyway, because logic is just another obstacle. And humans don't accept obstacles as final answers. They accept them as problems requiring creative solutions. He activates the communication system, sends a message on the frequency he knows Council intelligence monitors. 3 words. Simple, clear, inevitable. I'm coming anyway. Then he accelerates toward 50 warships that want him dead. And somewhere on his scarred, tired face, Silas Brennan smiles. Because this is what humans do. They problem-solve extinction. They keep their promises. They refuse to accept that death ends the fight. And they never ever learn when to quit. But not really. Because legends don't end. They just pause between chapters. And somewhere in the galaxy, in the quiet moments between violence and peace, beings still tell stories. About the human who walked into the most dangerous bar in civilized space, who kept his promises, who changed everything, and who's still out there, still fighting, still believing that truth matters more than survival, still proving that evolution doesn't forget, still being dangerous in the only way that really counts, by being reliably, impossibly, stubbornly human.